We're innovating faster. We're able to deliver transformative innovations that improve everyday life. We are proud to bring this to you in our consumer experience show, P&G's Life Lab.
Great. So the reason I wanted to open with this is that Procter & Gamble is over 180 years old. For the first time in the company's history, we were able to convince the company to actually participate in CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. And everyone kept talking, why should Procter & Gamble be there? We don't have products that are really electronic. What we said was, look, the CES no longer stands for Consumer Electronics Show, it's Consumer Experience Show. Because in our lives every day, our products and the interaction with technology is changing how we look at things. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about the change that the corporation's going through, how we're driving innovation, and sort of lessons learned. So my name is Alan Boehme. I happen to live in the Silicon Valley. I work with Procter & Gamble. I've been there 2 years. I've been with other companies such as Coca-Cola, DHL, ING. Either I can't hold a job or I just like to have fun and move from company to company and try new things. And it's really the latter. I've been doing this for many, many years. But I always keep one foot in the Silicon Valley. I've commuted to Amsterdam. I've commuted to Australia. I commute to New York and all over the world. But I think there's some lessons to be learned with corporations and understand if you're selling to a corporation, you're working with a large corporation, what do you need to do? Now, the problem with corporations, if you look at it from a technology perspective, is many years ago we adopted this thing called best practices. And all best practices is, when you really distill it down, is it's a way to commoditize something. So if you're a company and you are working with a company and they say this is a best practice, you automatically know that it's a commodity. And if you're trying to differentiate yourself, such as Procter & Gamble does with how we market our supply chain, although there are places for best practices, we really need to get ahead of that. We need to innovate. We need to think differently. And this is where we get into dilemmas, because the consulting firms, the software vendors, and others are all talking best practices. So commoditization and standardization is really not where we want to be for things that add value. It does not give us a competitive advantage. So if you realize that this is going on, and you realize that you've become addicted to best practices, you have to figure out how do you get out of that. And so I did a little bit of research and spent some time understanding, call it the issues with addiction just in general, and you can apply this to IT. If you're going to get out of this best practice mentality, you have to start thinking about and admitting that you do have a problem first. You have to realize that you have to do something about it. You have to go in and talk to people and say, hey, forgive me or forgive my predecessors, because fortunately in IT, usually the last CIO, the CIO's job only lasts about 3 or 4 years, so it probably did not start with you, but you're just perpetuating it. But you also have to recognize that you can recover, that you have to change. And the biggest thing that we have to do is we really need to get back IT professionals. For many years, large corporations and the legacy and heritage companies let the technical people go. They've been picked up by people such as Google and Facebook and Pinterest and startups and others. And the technologists have changed the world and have become threats to large corporations. They've also done a lot of good things by doing startups to bring new technology, new ideas, new business models into the large corporations. But we have to, as large corporations, we have to start embracing technologists for technology's sake as well to bring them back in. And once you have a mix of technology people and business people, you can drive a new innovation agenda. And the hardest thing that we have to do as engineers, the hardest thing that we have to do as technologists, is we have to become salespeople. And we have to be out there evangelizing, we have to be out there convincing people what we need to do in the future and how things are changed. But even if we do this, we have to look outside to understand where do we get our inspiration in order to do things. So as I said, I grew up for the last 20 years in the Silicon Valley, maybe even a little bit longer. And this is something that I found in an Entrepreneur magazine in 2013, and it really holds true. And this is what differentiates innovative ecosystems, especially the Silicon Valley, from everywhere else in the world. If you follow these 5 things, if you simply look at creating relationships that are trust and trustworthy, being open, seeking fairness, not advantage. It's about getting a win-win for everybody is what really matters. Paying it forward is very important. Always introduce people. Extend your network. Make connections for people. It does come back to you. There is such a thing as good karma in this world. It really does happen. And then opening doors and listen. I've got a couple stories here that I'll mention. This one comment about Mark Zuckerberg is sort of interesting, is that I know a number of VCs, and I've worked with a number of VCs over the year, and 2 VCs specifically, 2 friends of mine. One of them, way back in the early 2000s, would not take a call. There was a gentleman, young kid from school that was calling, said, "I want to talk to you about possibly investing in my company," and the one VC didn't take the phone call, wouldn't even see him. Another friend of mine met with him, listened to him. There was no way to monetize this, had no idea how this thing was going to work, but he gave him $100,000 to see what would happen. So I can tell you who's been happier financially from these 2, but just taking the time to do that. The same thing happened to me on a smaller scale. There's a little area full of startups in Silicon Valley called Mountain View, a little street called Castro Street, and I just happened to be at a coffee shop one day, had about 10 minutes before a train was going to come, ran in to get a cup of coffee real quick, and 2 young guys out of an accelerator came up to me and said, "We'd like to ask you some questions. We're with an accelerator, and we want to show you what we've been working on and what our company does." And I said, "Look, I've got 10 minutes, that's it, I have to go." Although the trains don't run as fast or on time as they do here in Switzerland, they are pretty accurate there, and you don't want to miss a train. So I said, "Look, let's just sit down and see what you do." I grabbed my coffee, we sat down, literally took about 3 minutes, went through the website, went through the phone app, gave them a critique, and I said, "Look, I've got to leave, here's my name, look me up on LinkedIn, good luck." A week later, I got hit up on LinkedIn, connected with these guys, I sent a nice message. Next thing you know, as soon as I connected, they must have been watching, for all I can tell, because 5 minutes later I got a message from them saying, "We need to see you. When are you going to be in Mountain View?" And I live in this beautiful place called Half Moon Bay, which overlooks the Pacific Ocean. And I was sitting outside on the deck there having a drink, and I said, "I'm not coming to you, you got to come to me." They literally hopped in their car, drove an hour and a half because of traffic, sat down, they walked up to me and they said, "Look," they said, "we listened to you, we talked to our mentors, we took all this information in, and we made all these changes a week ago to our website. About 80% of what you said we changed." And I said, "So what happened?" They said, "You've created a major problem for us." And I looked at them, I said, "What do you mean a major problem?" And they said, "The throughput on the website's up 300%. The conversion rates are up. We don't know how to scale. Help us scale." And so after talking with them and giving them some advice, long story short, really like these guys. I said, "Look, I'll help you. Let's get started. I don't want anything in return at this point in time. Let's not even talk about that. That's not what this is about. It's about paying it forward, doing the right thing." I said, "I'll help you raise money." We raised $2.5 million. 2 years later, they just turned down an offer for $50 million for their company because I think it's worth $100 to $150 million where it is today, and they're going to keep growing. So you never know who you're going to meet, but the point is pay it forward, listen, always take a phone call, take 10 minutes, extend your network. It does not hurt. If worst case is you'll learn something new, best case is you're going to make a new friend. So you should always do that. And the one thing that corporations and lessons learned from the Valley is really about experimenting and iterating together. This world is about 2 by 2 or 3 by 3. It is about cooperating. You go all the way back to Noah's Ark. It wasn't one animal at a time, it was 2 animals at a time. if you cooperate, if you collaborate, the prefix co really means something. And between corporations and startup, experimenting and innovating and iterating together is very, very important. So corporations have to change. We have to stop undervaluing what IT does. We have to think like VCs. VCs make lots of bets, a lot of small bets. 1 out of 10 is considered a real big win. They expect about 7 failures and 2 of them to about break even. But you have to have that mindset as a corporation when you start dealing with technology, as opposed to looking for that perfect solution that's going to last 5, 7 years. You also have to make these small investments and understanding that you are going to get some big returns and some small returns, and that they are going to fail. And we heard earlier, failure actually is good as long as you learn something. You don't fail doing the same thing 2 or 3 times. That just doesn't make sense. But if you fail, you learn, you pivot, then you're going to be able to go forward. You also need to learn lessons from history. In the United States, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, and he was reported to have said, I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways it won't work, before he actually got a light bulb to work. So where's the future? The future for us is, believe it or not, I believe, and I've been saying this for a number of years, the cloud is yesterday's story. With what's happening with compute, what's happening with AI and ML, everything is going to move out to the edge. With 5G networks, we are on another major shift here in the next couple of years and have to get ready to take advantage of it. Everything is predictive and adapted. No more are we looking in the rearview mirror and we're trying to analyze things. We're having ever-changing customer experiences versus brand experiences. No longer is it about the brand itself, it's the experience you have with this. All of this takes predictive analytics. This takes data scientists, data engineers. We are constantly looking for data scientists and data engineers. I was in Geneva at our office there yesterday. They wanted me to put a plug in. If anybody is interested in working with a company that has 5 billion customers using its products every day and data on 1.6 billion consumers, let us know. More than happy to talk to you about how you can help us, how we can help you, and actually have some fun together, changing the products, changing how the world is done. Robots are rising. There's a couple links here. You're welcome to watch them on your own. A friend of mine has created a place called The Creator. It's a new hamburger restaurant. 100% robots make everything from the sauce to how they cut the meat. Fresh ground, fresh cut vegetables. It's in San Francisco. It's utterly amazing. And the interesting thing is he realizes that this is not about replacing people in jobs. He actually employs almost the same number of jobs as a regular restaurant. He's repurposed the people to be out talking to the customers and spending time one-on-one with the customers and helping with the customer experience. He's also recognized that he needs to give them at least 5% of their work time in order to study and learn new skills. Some of them are taking programming courses. Some of them are doing other things to better their lives. This is about technology for good. Procter & Gamble, we believe in technology for good. You're seeing this coming about. So think about how you can actually create a society for good with technology as you're doing things. This is all driven by the IoT everywhere. Everything is being connected. And this leads to the dilemma that I've been facing with and been trying to figure out. With the amount of information that we have available to process at any given time, the question is, does AI assist people or do people assist AI? What are the moral and ethical questions that we have to answer in order to be able to take advantage of this? I'm unfortunately coming to the conclusion that with the amount of information that we have to process at any given time, the reality is that people are going to be assisting AI more and more. So how do we deal with making the decisions? How do we deal with the issues on life and death and other things that are going to come up if humans are dealing with the exceptions as opposed to the computers dealing with the exceptions? And this is real. You're starting to see it. I have a electric vehicle. It can be fully autonomous in driving. And I can tell you, it missed a red light. I had to slam on the brakes. I've seen other issues with it. Things are getting better. They're getting close. They're not perfect, but you do have to have a human involved. So the future is, if we're going to go forward in IT, we have to have good ideas, the right timing. We must become great storytellers. If you can't tell a story, you're never going to get people to help you. We have to make sure that we have financial resources. Procter & Gamble and other large corporations have lots of financial resources. We need to know where to spend it, spend the money. We need great engineering talent. We're competing with everybody for great engineering talent. And again, if you have talent and you want to have some fun and work on interesting things, we'd love to have you. And we need to really partner and build solutions together with startups. This is the only way we're going to take it to the next generation. So with that, what I'd like to do is end. We're going to do a little bit of a chat up here and see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Please. Thank you for making it out here. I kind of want to start the discussion with one thing that always kind of comes up, right? The corporate to startup gap that kind of happens in there. How do you work together with the startups? You mentioned the co as a really important aspect, right? What is your method to kind of approaching that? You know, in-house versus startups. Like, how do you build that bridge? I think that's a question that many people would be asking themselves in this audience.
So I think building the bridge is difficult. And unfortunately, I'll have to admit, many years ago, I probably put 2 or 3 startups out of business because you have to have that partnership. You have to have the relationship. It is okay to tell a corporation no. And many times people are so interested in chasing the brand, they're so interested in chasing the finances that come from working with a large company, they don't understand what that's going to do to the heart and soul of the company, of the startup, and it can tear it apart. So in learning from these things over the years, what it really is understanding something that you can define up front of what is the win-win for both of you. How are you going to be able to use that? How does that help the company grow? In my case, Procter & Gamble. How does that help the startup become a viable entity in the long run? And it really becomes a partnership. There isn't a magic way to do it. I started a program when I was at Coca-Cola called The Bridge in Tel Aviv. Out of that program, there's been 56 startups that the company worked with. Only about 6 or 7 of them have gone out of business. 10 of them have raised significant money and had exits. And the others are still operating, raising money today. That's better than what the VCs do.
I was going to say, that's better than the 7 out of 10 odds you mentioned just a couple minutes ago. Right?
It is, but that's because you take the time to partner and work with them. I had a woman from one of the startups reach out to me. I was telling you just the other night, actually yesterday, she sent a note. She's having trouble with her visa in the United States. For some reason, the State Department decided to block her visa renewal. And so she says, would you write a letter to the State Department for me? So the willingness to do those type of things and having those relationships and people being honest with you is the difference between success and failure.
It's like a symbiosis, really, versus a competition, I guess.
It really is. And that's the only way that you can actually work. And again, that's sort of one of the lessons from the Valley, is you work together, you do things together, and that's how you succeed. And I think more cities, more ecosystems need to understand that, and understand that you do pay it forward, you don't expect things in return, and I'll tell you, things do come back to you 10, 20-fold if you follow that advice.
And one other aspect I kind of want to jump into is the breaking of best practice, right? I thought that was the 10-step program. It was very interesting to kind of look at like that. Do you find that has to come from the inside? Do you find that people can bring the talent in to help them do that from the outside? How do you approach that problem? Because I think it's kind of very cemented into many cultures, this best practice and very structured sort of aspect.
I think that's where you have to have a mix. Again, my background is I go from company to company. I spend about 3 to 5, 6 years at a company. If you're trying to do it 100% inside, you don't really have any points of reference as to what's going on outside. And if you're coming in from the outside, you don't have any points of reference on the great history and legacy and all the good things that are going on in the company inside and have been going on for years. It takes that blend. The challenge is many times people are not brave enough to do this. And many times this is where the consultants come into play. Because consultants know they're going to come in for a short period of time. They're going to be able to have an impact. They're going to be able to partner with the people inside. Again, the partnering and cooperating. But they also know they're going to leave, so there isn't any political risk. Or you have to have somebody like me that doesn't care about political risk and just is there for the period of time that I'm going to be there and ready to move on anyway.
Makes sense. A friend of mine once told me you don't get fired for hiring IBM to do a project, right? I guess that's one of the aspects that kind of comes with that.
It really is.
Yeah. And in terms of things that you've experienced that you think taught you the most in that sense, that other people could kind of apply, what have you taken away from maybe some of the things that didn't go quite as planned?
Most projects, most things actually never fail for the technology. There's very few projects or programs or activities I've been involved in that it was a technological failure. Mm-hmm. Most of them fail purely because of people and culture. And identifying what are the needs of the people that you're dealing with internally or externally, what are the motivating factors, and making sure those things are met, helping people through the change cycle works. I've been at companies where we've tried to shortcut the change cycle, and all of a sudden we say we're going to be digital, we're going to be transformative, it doesn't work. At Procter & Gamble, we put in an entire program on digital education, on becoming digital. We created content that's available online. We're teaching courses. A lot of this is just laying the groundwork. We've created reverse mentoring sessions because as you look at it, new people coming into the workplace are digital natives. And you have a lot of people that are in leadership position that are not. So we always joke around, you know, if you really want to understand how to fix your new iPhone, I just picked mine up the other day, go give it to your kid, because your kid's going to be able to figure it out faster than you are. But you really have to look at these things, and so there's numerous areas of failure, numerous areas of success. The idea is to be like a bee, and you want to pollinate and go from project to project or company to company and take the best little pieces and drop it off at the next one. You will know you're succeeding is when people that have worked for you are rising up either in your company or in other companies and getting more and more senior jobs and are starting to implement things that you've taught them in the past with new twists. And if you're open to learning what these new twists are, you'll continue to learn. You have to be a lifelong learner here.
And I guess you have to instill that in the culture as well.
It is, and cultures take a long time to change. Let's be honest. You know, you're talking 6, 7 years to change these cultures. Procter & Gamble's culture goes back 180 plus years. I was with another company, as I mentioned, Coca-Cola, over 100 years. DHL even went back into the early 60s. It is hard to change cultures.
Is anybody here actually working on changing culture? Yeah? Number of hands, number of people in there? Yeah?
Yeah, I'd love to hear thoughts on this, because this is something that that every corporation struggles with. But it's very important in order to get there for the future. I think you have to start with good values, and our values in the company are very strong. We're involved in sustainability. We're involved in personally, I do a lot of work with STEM. I'm a big believer in diversity, and we're doing this and expanding some programs globally. But you know, you have to have those general policies, those general purpose in life and purpose in the company as a good basis in order to be able to start changing the culture to something better as well.
Yeah. I'd like to open it up to the audience. That's why, you know, we got the first question out there already. I guess those were some candidates in there. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? Perfect. Let me toss you the mic. Here you go. It's softer than it looks.
Thank you. Hi, Alan. Thank you very much. That was a great start to the morning. I'd be interested to know who mentors you. What courses do you take, or what books are you currently reading?
So I think I'm a little bit unique because, as I said, I live in the Silicon Valley. I really live on an airplane. I'm between now and the end of the year, I'm home a week and a half. That's it. But I spend a lot of time with startups. I spend a lot of time mentoring startups. I spend time lecturing. I shouldn't say lecturing, but interacting with people at PhD candidates at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm on the advisory board there. I'm on the advisory board for the University of San Francisco School of Marketing. I spend time at Berkeley in the Skylab and elsewhere. What I've learned for me is the more opportunities to spend time with young people that are learning, I can actually learn more. Personally, I've been spending a lot of time in the space industry right now. I met a woman a few years ago that's been working with NASA and ESA for the last 15 years. And I really believe we're on the verge of something big. You can see what's happening with SpaceX and Moon Express and Blue Origin and everything. There is something big that's going to happen technologically that's going to change our lives on Earth. It's going to change the potential for lives elsewhere in the universe. And this is all technology that can be inspirational to you in order for you to think about how to do things different. So I do things through absorption, a lot of different podcasts, TED Talks and things. I wish I could say I had time to read books, but I'd really have to take my information in orally or auditorily as opposed to taking the time to read right now. I'm just never sitting still long enough.
Guess they still have to make a book in a pill, right? That's the next step. Perfect. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Does anybody have any other questions they would like to ask? Perfect. I think I would like to end with one question on that note. How important do you think it is to surround yourself with out-of-industry experiences or inputs or just completely diverse thinking? Because I think, if I think back to, you know, if you're in Palo Alto, you're sitting at Coupa Cafe or something, you're having a conversation with somebody that might be in the food industry, that might be in, you know, working at Google, Facebook, or totally different aspect, totally different mindset, totally different industry. How important is that to you in your daily life?
It's very important. I mean, I've worked in 6 or 7 different industries, from airlines to logistics to manufacturing to consumer goods to banking to, I've been across the board. And there's more similarities than people think, and there's more things that you can leverage from one into the other. And to have that diversity in your experience at work, to have the diversity with the people that you interact with, different cultures, different age groups, different nationalities, it makes a huge difference. What I do find is that different cities in the world, and the Bay Area is wonderful, is very open up to it. It's very much a melting pot. Being able to go in and sit down and have these discussions, even if it's 5-10 minutes over a coffee, people will take the time. There's other places in the world where things are more closed, people are more siloed, and that's probably the problem. Until we can break this up and get people to start thinking horizontally, looking at life through a prism as opposed to looking at life through a glass where they can see things clearly, it's not going to change, and that's things that we have to work on.
Perfect, thank you. I think that's something we can take away. Think of it more as a prism. Alan, thank you for being here today. We've got a little something for you. Hold on, let me grab that for you. You know, it's when you do get a chance for those books, you know, I think this is something you can use to carry them around.
I certainly can.
There's a Swiss Army knife in there as well, so for the airplanes.
Great.
Just be
Thank you
careful.
very much.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause.